The Hawaiian Ahupua'a system of land use permits access to all resources from mountains to sea. The sharing of these resources created a social system in these islands that ensured survival from generation to generation. Within this living system of production and interaction, highly specialized technologies of fish pond and taro cultivation were perfected. In the following three-part series, historian and anthropologist Marian Kelly, whose research into Hawaiian culture has become her life's work, will introduce us to the concepts and the people through which these unique contributions of Hawaiian culture continue to live.
We see that the Hawaiians looked to the landscape for inspiration of their poetry. They traced their very genealogies to the elements of the land. They were the Kanaka. They were the people of old. The places that they inhabited became their domain, the Waukanaka. The wild places were the Wauakua, the places of the gods. The Waulipo. The Waulipo is the dark forest, the deep forest, the forest where the tallest trees grow. The cloud brings some amount of moisture that condenses on the trees, trickles down the trunks of the trees, drops off the leaves and branches of the trees, and feeds the ground. The Apa'a, the leeward savanna, the dry windward forest, and grasslands. And below that, the Waukanaka, the domain of man. At the Kahakai, you have the strand vegetation, things like Naupaka, Pohuehue, Kaunaoa. And outside of that, Kohola, the reef flats, Kaihe'enalu, the places for surfing, the Ko'a, the places that people went to fish, and beyond that, the Kaihohonu, the deep sea. Aloha These are just examples of the way the people of old divided their landscape. Kapaiaina Apau, all of the islands, were divided by the people of old into ahupua'a. A typical ahupua'a is a division of land that goes from the uplands out to and including the sea. When you lived in an ahupua'a in times of old, your rights of occupancy did not end at the shoreline, but included the ocean resources of your ahupua'a.
We find that this terrace system begins out by the ocean and goes all the way up to the waterfall in the back of the valley. To me, this indicates that this valley was once heavily populated, just as all of Hawaii was, prior to the arrival of the white men in 1778. And the people that lived and worked in this valley were most likely the Makainana, the common people, because they were the farmers, they were the mahi'ai, the people that would care for the land. In these lo'is, the Hawaiians would not continually force their crops upon them and deplete the soil. They practiced a type of crop rotation where they would allow lo'i to lie fallow, just as we are today. We have kalo planted in some, and some are lying fallow, and we're trying to re-enrich these lo'i with organic matter, just as the Hawaiians did. So the Hawaiians were really akamai about maintaining the quality of their resources. The stream is another example. Without water, we die. The Hawaiians recognized that. They recognized that there was a limited amount of resources here on our island. And as a result, they practiced a concept called malama aina, They cared for the land as if it was their child.
Waihe'e Valley is one of the largest sources of water in the state of Hawaii. And thusly, the Hawaiians did cultivate this land intensely. This was one of the largest taro-growing regions in the ancient days. There were lo'i coming all the way to the ocean. This river used to flow constantly. It was always filled. Right now, it's partly taken by the sugarcane company.
This little trickle of water is all that's left of this tremendous stream bed that used to be here, bubbling over with a waterfall and water going on down to the taro gardens. When commercial sugar came to the islands, some of the dry areas needed water, and so what they did is they came in and made ditches. And the result was that they took the water from all the streams, and the remaining water that they let trickle down is this. Well, as soon as you get down there to the taro gardens, they've got no water. And actually, this is illegal. And the people who are the people of the land, who used to do their agriculture in taro and sweet potato, now get left with no water, so they get driven away from their kuleanas, from their land.
There were 33 streams flowing in the West Maui mountain range, and we only have 2 left. It's puzzling and ironic because we do have a revised statutes of Hawaii that state that there shall be a minimum stream flow in every stream that runs through the ocean. And the tragedy of it all is that when you ask a young Hawaiian if he knows anything about hi'iwai, he knows nothing about hi'iwai. He doesn't know what it looks like. He doesn't know that it's an opihi, a freshwater opihi. So, you know, more education about what's in our streams and why it's important to have them is essential. The West Maui Molokai Taro Farmers Association, their role is to ensure that all valleys that had minimal stream flow will be restored. The minimal stream flow will be restored. And not only restored, but that there will be an economic base set up in each of these valleys, which is very important for us.
The West Maui mountain range, and I'm talking about Waikapu, Waihe'e, Kahakaloa, extensively done in taro, extensively. Even my grandfather used to walk me through some of these places here and show me the different irrigation ditches, the awaises. You know, the water source always fed like veins into the land. So when you did have a lot of rainfall, the water didn't gush down in a flood control project so that it'd pollute the ocean. It flowed through the land evenly.
Yeah, this is a Kahakaloa stream, and it's our main water source here in this valley. The water from this stream we use for domestic purposes and for our irrigation of our taro patches. But there was a kunohiki that went up on a hill here and yelled. One yell. Everybody brought their sickle, brought their hose, and went up and cleaned both awais. And if you didn't clean the awais, you didn't get water. That was it. Every household had a representative that went and helped. And that's why the awais were so clean and neat. We're trying to redo that again. And I think the unique thing about Kahakaloa Valley is that we control what happens, where the water goes, how we're going to bring the water down. That's the important thing. We control it. It's our ahupua'a.
We're in North Kona on the island of Hawaii, and the zone that we're in at this moment is the Apa'a zone. These are the uplands, the gardens behind Kealakekua Bay. And it was here in the Apa'a zone that the Hawaiians raised the staple of their diet, taro, and the other crops like tea, sugarcane, wauki, and sweet potato. Here in Kona, we don't have perennial streams, and this is why it's so important to cultivate the retention of moisture wherever you can, and that's what they did here in Kona. Now we can see the iwi here, and that's the pile of rocks that goes Mauka Makai. And so here you have the farmers going up and down the land, clearing the land and making these piles, which of course there's a lot of moisture kept in the ground underneath the rocks, and that can be utilized to grow tea, sugarcane, and a variety of other small plants. One of the things about Kona, you get a cloud formation out over the ocean which protects the land from a very hot afternoon sun, and altogether you have, I would say, the most ideal cultivation area for dry land crops. It really couldn't be better. And add to that the fact that the Hawaiians actually constructed, built, planted a breadfruit forest just makai of here. They had breadfruit trees that were growing 50, 60, 70 feet high, and of course, reaching up into the upper atmosphere, they will attract more moisture. And so this is the kind of thing that the Hawaiians observed in the environment and then utilized to the best effects for generating the crops that they needed. When Menzies came here in 1793, I think it was, he was here in Kona with Vancouver. He was the botanist on board. And this is what he wrote: "Every step we advanced through these plantations became more and more interesting, as we could not help but admire the manner in which these little fields on both sides of us were laid out to the greatest advantage that far exceed in point of perfection the produce of any civilized country within the tropics." Now that's saying something. Here you have represented from the ocean to the mountains the whole Ahupua'a concept. The land provides everything that's necessary for people who are living on this piece of land, all the things that are necessary for life, from the plants that they consume, the foods that they consume, to the plants that they need to make their cordage, to catch their fish, for plants that they need to make their cloth, to wear their clothes, on up to the forest where they have big trees for cutting and building their canoes, or trees for lumber for their houses, and everything that is necessary can be grown in this Mauka Makai stretch of land.
This is the Ahupua'a of Honokua, where taro was abundant in this whole upper area of Honokua. Taro patches, or malakalo. Okay, aloe is referred to people who plant in the water. They have water for planting, and a mala is usually on dry land, or especially in Kona we use the term mala. Mala refers to any patch of any type of food. It doesn't have to be taro. It can be sweet potato, or pumpkin, or bananas, mai'a. We used to plant ginger, a lot of ginger in this area too. And the ginger was also used for mulching when there was no ama'u. Ama'u would be the top mulching material for taro. The area we're in right now is about 2,000 something feet. That's perfect for taro. If you plant taro below 1,000 feet, your taro will not mature. This is called a huli. So when we plant the huli in Kona, we don't have to make a deep hole, or you just put it in, and it's good enough, you know. You go.
There's at least 10.
At
or
least
more
10,
than,
yeah?
More than 10.
Maybe more than 10, yeah.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So from one plant, maybe within 6 months, you can get 10 huli. And from these 10 huli, you plant that 10 huli, you get another 10 from each one. So within a year, you should have enough to plant. Come. This is one variety called mana. One stalk, it shoots up, mana like your fingers, mana. So the taro will come up like that, all different hulis on one. This variety is Oopukai. It's a good taro because it can be made into poi, and you can aipa'a. Folks know what aipa'a is. Eat like as it is, don't need to smash them. And nice color, purple color. Well, of course, the kings, they wanted color, yeah? But the common people, they get big family, plenty small kids, so their taste was the most important, plus plentiful, yeah? So when pounding your poi, your taro is all peeled and it's in here, you would just smash it down, keep it low, so it doesn't splatter around. Then you would hold it in two hands and use the edge of your poi stone or poi pounder until you get all the lumps out. Then you add water to your consistency. But if you don't know how to pound, pa'akiki, so you're going to tend to have pu'u. And so,
Lumps.
lumps, yeah. Pu'u means lumps in your poi. And you know, like old people, they grumble if your poi is get lump inside. See, they usually say, "I ko poi." I means smooth. Then you can pound it hard and make all that sounds in a big loud noise like bubble gum. Yeah, it's a good fun, you know. And two guys. Usually, my mother used to sit on one side, I would sit on one side, and when we get close to finishing, and we see who can make the most noise, you know. Because if you know how cracking gum is, and that thing go pak pak, really nice sound. And that's wali. That's wali. That means it's finished, and then you put them in your container. The mud holes are very important in Kona, especially because we don't have any rivers or running streams. To survive the plants, we usually plant them in the mud holes because it'll stay muddy for 7, 8 months. And then there's quite a few mud holes in the Apua of Honoko, which I guess nature gave it to us to protect our plants and to keep our young seedlings growing, like especially a taro that is so important to the Hawaiian people. Kalopake for upelu cham, palu. Grated and mixed with pumpkin. This particular taro, beginning from the kuhina of the huli, which is the stalk here, going down to the end for the beginning where it started growing, is approximately 5 feet in length. This is the luau leaf from the pake taro, real good, tender. The old Hawaiians never, like nowadays, they use any type of leaf. The old people only use this type, even on the poi taro. And then the ava root, we planted a few here and there for, sometimes people want to chew on it and for medicine. The guava shoots was used for medicine. This shoots, yeah, about 1.5 inches from the tip for diarrhea. Yeah, you pluck this off the shoots here. You can take off these big leaves and fold this whole thing and put it out and chew it. Bitter about it. Good. Yeah, this is the old trail where they would drag the old canoes down, 30 or 40 men sometimes. On this same trail, bamboo, they planted these bamboos. These portions, which was much thicker than the young ones, they would cut it below the joint here and cut it below this joint, and they use it as a torch. They would go lama in the night. That means to go torching, because they never had flashlight in those days. So they go catch crab and in the ponds, plenty fish. Plania in the pond. They used it for frame for their hullies. It's very valuable for them for if they don't really carry these big ohias down to the beach heavier, so they take the bamboo, except the corner post they use ohia. Yeah, the ohia is very valuable for make tiki, for house frame. So there was no wasting. Everybody shared. It was a real family ohana deal in the area.
From mountain to sea, Hawaiians used every available portion of water for the growing of fish. The cool mountain streams, they would grow fish in their taro lo'i. Further downstream were the local wai. Local means pond and wai means fresh water. These were freshwater ponds. Closer to the shoreline were the local pu'u'one. Pu'u'one means sand dune or sand heap. And as you can see, these ponds were still inland, but they were separated from the shore by a sand dune. They were connected to the ocean through the Auwai Kai, or saltwater channel. And in this way, the pond water could be regulated. Salt water could be let into the pond. Very often, these ponds were fed by springs or streams. These ponds were brackish water, and brackish water, according to the Hawaiians, grew the very sweetest fish. Most often, these ponds grew ava and aholehole and ama-ama. From the shoreline, we enter into the ocean to the local kuapa. Kuapa means wall, and what these ponds were essentially were a long rock wall that embraced part of the ocean and captured it to the shoreline.
Kaneohe Bay was a very productive bay particularly for mullet and ava. When McAllister, the archaeologist, was here in 1929 and 1930, he noted that there were about 23 fish ponds in Kaneohe Bay alone. And I guess Heia was one of the larger ones, and this is Heia Pond, 88 acres, with a wall that is about 5,000 feet long. Unusual because it goes completely around the pond. Of course, these walls were built by Hawaiians who lived in the area. They were a tremendous undertaking to get these large stones down here. There are no stones like this naturally in Kaneohe Bay. Of course, Hawaiian fish ponds were built right on the reef, which means the wall enclosed a portion of the reef, so that the ecology of that reef didn't really change drastically, but a fish pond enhanced the resources of the reef, putting fresh water into the pond and bringing all the nutrients down from inland and putting them in the pond enhanced the growth of the algae in the pond, which of course then encouraged the fish to come in, enhancing the resources of the land and the sea. This pond was said to grow some of the sweetest mullet of all the islands. The mullet were able to be raised very large, some of them up to 3 feet, and that's big mullet, anai. In Hawaiian times, it was said that the land was fat if it had a fish pond, and that meant that the resources of the land were enhanced by the presence of a fish pond. In the old days, they tell us that when the pond had to be cleaned, everybody living on the land got into it and they cleaned it. In exchange for that labor, they were able to feed themselves also from the pond. Kamakau tells us this. Sharing and working together and calling everybody together. Many of the ponds, you know, we talked about the 23 or 24 ponds in Kaneohe Bay in the 1930s. Many of those ponds have been filled in and houses built on them, so that urbanization is right along the edge of Kaneohe Bay now. The ponds were filled in by dredging the bay, the reefs of the bay. A lot of this was done in the 40s, primarily, when the military established itself out at Mokapu. Spoils from the dredge were often put into the fish ponds. Many of the ponds are filled in and not even recognizable today as having been ponds. We're now at Kahana Bay, this beautiful valley, and we're right in the middle of Huilua Fish Pond. This is the walled pond, the Kuapa Pond at Kahana. Now let's see if we can find some pua over here. There they are. Woo, nice. You know, Hawaiians knew which fish were herbivorous and which fish were carnivorous. And they selected the herbivorous fish to put in their ponds because you create the food for them and they come into the ponds. They eat and get fat, and then you close the gate so they can't get out. And you've got yourself a natural food bank. One of the stories that Mr. Kekona told me, he was one of the late ones to manage the pond, was that he had a favorite mullet and swim around in the pond, and they called him John Bull. He's a big, fat mullet. And he used to come over to the makaha and call him. And John Bull would come out of the pond, and he'd come and he'd tickle him underneath his chin, and he just loved that. They're very friendly mullet. And then he'd instruct him to go out and round up a few mullet for dinner that night. And so John Bull would disappear, and pretty soon he'd come back, and there'd be 3 or 4 mullet following him, and Kekona would close the makaha gate, and he'd pick up the mullet with his hands. He wouldn't have to go fishing or anything. There was the mullet for him, and then he'd let John Bull out to go back into the pond. And this is what he told me. I'm just telling you what he said. I think it's a great story. This is really what a fish pond is all about. Hawaiians call it limu, and on it are what we call diatoms, minute plants that the fish consume and grow on. The favorite fish raised in fish ponds was the gray mullet. They are what we call herbivores. They eat the plant food and grow fat. By observing these fish, Hawaiians discovered something terribly important. They discovered that you could raise protein in fish ponds for people to eat that was 100 times more productive than depending on the natural food chain. In the natural food chain, tiny crabs and shrimp feed on limu. The crabs and the shrimp get eaten by small fish. Then the small fish get eaten by big fish, and finally, the big fish get eaten by human beings. That's the natural food chain. In a fish pond, herbivores skip a couple of links in the natural food chain by eating algae and then becoming the food for human beings. The Hawaiians, of course, were extremely sensitive to their environment and observed all these things going on with the plant life and the animal life in the ponds. So they concentrated on raising the herbivore link of the food chain. The reef was already productive. By placing a wall around part of a reef, Hawaiians created a pond that protected the herbivore fish from the large carnivorous fish. So we have here tremendous production. Actually, it was an enhancement of the natural resources because they grew the same thing that grew in the ocean naturally, but they grew more of it. Nowhere else in Polynesia did any people create fish ponds like these. These Hawaiian fish ponds are unique in the Pacific. According to a survey that was made around 1901, 1902, a fellow by the name of John Cobb estimated that there were about 350 fish ponds in Hawaii at the time of discovery. But even in 1902, when Cobb did a survey, he discovered that there were over 1 million pounds of fish still being raised in Hawaiian fish ponds. And in 1975, there are only about 20,000 pounds of fish coming from fish ponds. The fish pond raising has gone really downhill, and it's too bad because here is perhaps the most efficient way for producing protein for mankind. Here we are at Anaiho'omalu. This is a good example of a pond that is constructed just inland of the sand dune, sand beach. This pond used to be absolutely clear. Well, what's happening is there's too much nutrients in the pond. And I think one of the problems is that all the fertilizer that you use to keep your golf course green and all the water that you put on it to keep it nice and green eventually ends up in the pond. Yeah, here's the kaku, barracuda, insatiable carnivore. A kaku can really consume an awful lot of fish, and that's what you don't want in your pond. I think he had his breakfast already. He's just waiting for lunch. Of course, every fish pond has eels in it. This is our makaha. Right now, the tide is going out, so the water is flowing out of the pond and out into the ocean. These two gates can provide an area where they can capture the fish. When the tide is coming in, the fish tend to come into the makaha to get the cool salt water that comes into the pond. And so they'll come right up against the gate, in essence, trying to get out, and you put the gate down behind them. So you've got them locked into a very small space here, and you can take a scoop net and just scoop up your lunch. This is a technique of capturing the fish so that you don't have to sweep the whole pond. Now, these small pua that are just outside the makaha are just waiting in order for the tide to change. And when the water stops flowing out, they'll come in, many of them will come into the pond through the makaha and get taken in by the flow of the water.
In Hawaiian times, there were enough schools of mullet that were coursing up and down the coastline producing these baby fish, so that very naturally, these fish would aggregate around the outside of the ponds and go into the ponds at high tide and populate the fish pond in a very natural way. Later on, when fish ponds were used commercially, one of the things the pond keepers did was to go up and down the coastline and catch these tiny little fish to stock their ponds. They caught the pua in nets to take them back to the fish pond, transporting them in water tanks in their trucks.
O ka mea nui o ka lāhui pa'a, ke ia mau loku ia, li ke ole o ke ia wahi. Haupua e ke aloha, ke ike wau I ke ia mau ia, a me ke ia mau mea I loko ka loku ia. Aloha no wau ke ia wahi o ka lāhui pa'a. These ponds that we have here at Kalahuipua are perhaps some of the best examples of Hawaiian aquaculture that we do have preserved for us. Perhaps the most significant feature of Kalahuipua is this natural cluster of fish ponds like we have here. Now this pond is really a good example of a pond, a larger pond, Lahuipua, a fish pond that was divided into a smaller pond, which made it a more easier, manageable unit for the Hawaiians who did work the fish ponds. The pond walls that we have here, which are called kuapau, were constructed around that period, somewhere between 1200 and 1400 AD. Before the wall was completed, they did add the makaha, which is uniquely found in Hawaiian fish ponds. The traditional makaha consisted of these vertical wooden poles, which were usually ohia, that were lashed together with the vine, a vine found in the mountains. The purpose of the makaha was to allow a greater inflow or greater volume of seawater into the ponds to help with circulation. And it also, because of the spaces in between the pools, it allowed small fries such as the pu'ama or the baby mullet and the pu'ava, which is a small ava. It would allow them in the ponds as well as the many other varieties of fish you find in the ponds today, including predators such as the barracuda and the papio. The other important thing about the makaha was, besides allowing water into the ponds for circulation, fish from the sea that could fit through the greater pools would enter the ponds and basically grazing off of the natural algae, seaweed, microorganisms found in the pond. They would get to a size too big to fit back out through the gate and get back out to the sea.
One of the uses that the makaha has is a fish trap. On the incoming tide, when the tide comes in, it flows through this makaha system right here, through the rocks and through the kiawe posts that we have placed. The fish would come from the pond into this pen system, and we could close the gate and we can harvest mullet, ava. Basically, the makaha would be the heart of the fish pond. And it's a unique system. It really works and it's really effective.
Kaloko Pond, where we are now, at the Makai end of Kaloko Ahupua'a, is a walled pond, Kuapa. It connects the headlands of a small bay. So this is one of the walled ponds of Kekaha, Kona.
This pond, Kaloko and Aimaka Pond, we find that on the perimeter of the ponds, they have these compartments. There may be a possibility that they would gather the fish, put it into this giant pond here, and then from here, whatever they could segregate after they surround it with the nets and segregate the fish, by species, and then whatever the king's favorite fish, for that day, they would get it here. I mean, that's one theory. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's one theory.
The fish of the day. But this is an unusually deep pond, so that it's very difficult to fish this pond when you have to get the fish out. So when I talked to the people who used to work this pond, they said that you only fish this pond at nighttime, so that you go out in the middle of the night when there's no moon and the fish can't see the shadow of the net. And you go very quietly. You go in a boat, a small flat-bottom boat, and you put your nets so the fish can't go from one place to another. And everybody's keeping very quiet. And you hope that when you pull your net up, you hope you got some fish in it.
Since 1986, one of the concerns was what kind of outside influences were intruding into the fish pond. And we found that the red mangrove was one of the intrusions. And in order to protect the cultural value of the fish pond, we had to come in and remove the red mangrove from the fish pond. And the way we're doing it is by mainly manual labor. And we have to try to do something because within 10 years, another 10 years, we will overtake all of the fish ponds that is here in West Hawaii.
The mangrove, my understanding that it was introduced in the early 1900s to Molokai, and so now you find that it's very extensive in most of the ponds and along the shorelines along the coast of Molokai. Right now we're looking at Ali'i Fish Pond. It's about 46 acres, but it's partially filled now, and people today still come into this pond, the local people, and they come and crab inside. They come lama nighttime. Right now this is Kanoa Fish Pond. It's in the Ahupua'a of Makakupaia. If you look at the fish pond, so at the middle portion, you can see the Hawaiians, how they built it. So there's a slight little harbor coming in. See that green harbor out there? So fish would usually run in areas like that. So they probably came into those areas and probably came into, at certain points where the maka is, into the pond area. We're now at the location of Kupeke Fish Pond in the Ahupua'a of Kupeke. It was noted in ancient times for having fat o'eo or bonefish, and there's still a lot of o'eo now in this pond. The first pond that we're seeing up from here, Mauka, is Pipio Fish Pond. It's almost completely encircled by mangrove. The following pond that has a wall from one point of land to another is called Ni'aupala. And after Ni'aupala, it's called Kaopeahina. We are now looking at Puhaloa Fish Pond. It is almost now completely enclosed by mangrove. This is Keawenui Fish Pond, and it's a large pond with almost a straight wall joining 2 points of land. This is called Kainaohe Fish Pond. So at the land side of the pond, there are 2 lo'i that feed directly into the pond. The next pond we're looking at is Walapui Pond.
This is Walapui Valley. The stream come out to there. So all these rocks came from Walapui. How we're building the wall, we're putting big stones and packing them down with ili stone, which is smaller stones, and then putting a layer of coral.
And you know, it's a skill for set rocks without cement, and how to set them for make them pass strong, yeah? You gotta take your time, get pride in your job, and do the best you can. You know, when you're doing a good job, you can feel the mana of the wall, you know, and you can feel the strength of the wall when you do them right. I'm going to die, but my grandson going to tell his son, your great-grandfather built and rebuilt this foundation wall. The maka is controlling what goes in the pond and what you like keep out of the pond. So the maka are going to play a major role, especially when a tide going to start running in, all the fish going to come against the current here. And when a tide going to come out, all the fish going to come like coming up on. They go against the current every time. Fish pond is a challenge, you know, in raising mullet amama. What we gotta do is give the mullet a 2 to 3 year lifestyle in the pond. Then, you know, that amama going known as the makainana for the pond. Also, we're going to be feeding them. And when we feed the fish, it becomes tame. And it belongs to this pond. And he no like go out, stay in a pond. Then 2, 3 years down the road, the anai or the big anai, he start reproducing in the pond. And then we don't need every year go out, go look for baby pool, bring in. We're going to get our own hatchery within nature itself. The key is the patience, yeah?
Okay, this pond is basically fed through springs, and the water quality is really good for raising fish. Types of fish that we have: trout, mullet, hole, tilapia. This is called the maka'a. The old Hawaiians used to catch their fish using this system where the mullet or the hole come in through here because they want to go out to the ocean to spawn. And once they get in through here, we close these gates you see in the front here, and that's the way how we trap the fish. We trap the fish in this box and transfer into these cages back here, and then we take it back to the holding pens we have in the front. What we do is we keep them in smaller cages, and then once they get bigger, then we put them into bigger cages and bigger holding pens. And basically they take about 8 to 10 months to get to market size.
The whole goal behind what we're doing is to develop a round pond farm in the state of Hawaii. You know, is to make aquaculture, shrimp aquaculture, successful in the state. Last year we ran this pond for three separate cycles. Total time was about 46 weeks, and we produced 19,800 pounds in this pond. As a matter of fact, this pond outproduced at least 5 or 6 of these 1-acre ponds last year. So we're real proud of that. The whole concept behind this system is with a round pond and a center drain and current drivers such as the paddle wheel and the water here, we're keeping the environment clean for the shrimp, and that is essential in intensive culture. I like to say that this pond was designed not by engineers, but by the guys who actually are in the mud, in the muck, working with shrimp. And those are the guys that are going to tell you, how to best design a system that will work. This system here, right now we're using it for shrimp, but I'm sure it would work real well for fish too. So even though we're in a modern world with heavy technology and what have you, to me the true success story is taking the old and the new and blending them so that it works.
Ilua mo ke kia I mehe anu He'eia is named because of the ho'ova'ava'a rain. When the rain falls at He'eia, it falls so heavily that all the soil is washed into the sea. At Luamo'o, and Luamo'o is there near the fish pond there, it's the home of the mo'o that was a guardian, a kia'i, of the fish pond and of the people that lived in the area. And I know her name to be Meheanu. I'm told she was a very benevolent kind of mo'o and very friendly to the people, and they really loved her here in this ahupua of He'eia.
One of the things about fish ponds is that every pond had a guardian spirit, and this guardian spirit was called a mo'o. These were great big dragon lizards, and they lived in the pond or close by, and they took care of the pond. And as long as the caretakers, the people, took good care of the pond, the mo'o would make sure that the pond was very reproductive and produced lots of fish. But if you didn't take care of the pond, if you neglected taking care of the pond, or if the chief of the Ahupua'a, where this pond was located, if the chief was stingy or greedy or anything like that, then the story is that the mo'o would take all the fish away and there would be no fish for anyone. So the message there is take care of the pond. Deal for limu or algae to grow. And then all around the edges of the dark green algae you can see a red color. Well, the red color is not algae, those are tiny shrimps. And these shrimp are called by the Hawaiians opai ula. These ponds were very important to the Hawaiians, and they cultivated them and kept them clean and kept the shrimp and used them then in their fishing techniques, primarily for opelu. Fishermen trails often were used at nighttime. Fishermen fish all night long, not just when the sun is up. And so you have these pieces of white coral that show up in the night.
When you come to an area like this, you kind of wonder why would the Hawaiians want to settle in a place, that's basically lava flow? Well, one of the theories that we see is because of the fresh water, and probably that's why they settled here at Kaloko.
This whole business of the fresh water that seeps down underneath the lava flows and is very useful, not only for bathing and washing, but also for drinking. And this is a beautiful little oasis right in the middle of the darkest lava flow you can imagine. And so this gives you an idea of how much
fresh water actually flows out into the sea along this coastline.
When you look at the ruins around the Kaloko, there's a lot, there's hundreds of ruins. There must have been hundreds and thousands of Hawaiians living here.
One of the stories about these particular ahu, that some people believe that they may have been originally placed here in order to make the borderline going Mauka and Makai between the two Ahupua'a. And we know from David Malo's stories that indeed there were oftentimes ahu at the border between the Ahupua'a. And that's exactly what Ahupua'a means, the ahu on which the pig, which is a symbol for Lono, was placed.
This particular spot holds a sacred site, which is the highest structure in the islands. Its tradition is that it was built by Umi, son of Liloa, in about the 16th century, so we can date this, say, from about 1500. One of the interpretations of the heiau is that it's a directional register. If you stand in this heiau, on the solstice day, the sun will rise over that cairn, and it will set with respect to the other one. Therefore, from that cairn to that cairn is the swing of the sun from the north to the south. So, you know, it's a very spiritual place for the accessibility you have to this horizon circle and the sky overhead, the sun by day and then all of the others at night. Perfect place to do it. And if you want to touch base with the past, this is one place to come.
I mean, this is, to me, a very powerful place in Hawaii. I could see where the great observers like our ancestors were, and they were so in tune with their natural environment. These three mountains and this cradle he's sitting in had to be tremendous importance to them. I mean, could you imagine that if there was a kahuna who understood the heavens here, and there were students that had to come to a place to get that kind of almost great power, that knowledge of the heavens, this would be a great place to do it. If I were to teach navigation, I would require my students to come here. It's a real special place to view the stars. In a lot of ways, it does appear close to the heavens. That mountain, Mauna Kea, is really powerful to me because that would be my target. I needed to connect myself to something physical here when I come back. It's a physical place, but at a spiritual level. I kind of felt like if I'm next to Mauna Kea, when I come back, I'll find it. Take it for what it's worth, in 1980, the sun set right on top of it. That was kind of like the clue that we had seen the islands. We sailed from Tahiti. It's 3,000 miles of sailing, and my first time, sailing back to Hawaii, and the sun set right on top of the island, right on top of the mountain.
I think the important thing for me is the health of the individual, the health of the family, the health of the Hawaiian community, the health of the environment. When one part of the Hawaiian is hurting, then I think that whole part really suffers. When we got involved in the Molokai Heart and the Molokai Diet Study, we knew that if we excited people to the point where they know that you eat the Hawaiian foods, the taro, the ulu, the uwala, the mountain greens, fish, you eat all that and you could really prolong your life. Hawaiians have always had a real strong subsistence lifestyle, and they still subsist here in Molokai and other rural areas where the fishing is accessible, where they still have the skills of farming. Women just go out at weekends and even more often to gather limu. If they're not fishing, the brothers are hunting. This has got to continue. And we need to keep the lands, we need to keep the shorelines available. She and the brothers are hunting. This has got to continue. And we need to keep the lands, we need to keep the shorelines available for this subsistence ongoing activities. We need to kind of really look at how we can collectively get back into the taro patches. We need to secure those lo'is. We need to rebuild them, straighten out the awais again, and get back down and start planting our taro. We need to keep it inexpensive. We need to be able to distribute it amongst our own people here. Hawaiians have first preference to the water. So we got to keep that resource. You need the forest above that, so you have the rain coming down, soaking into the ground and coming out as the springs that you see all along the east end. Because these are the springs that kind of percolated into the taro patches that were just mauka of the fish pond. So we need to look at the different axes, which is important for the picking of the herbs, medicinal herbs necessary. One other thing we need to do is establish the kapu, reestablishing those conservation practices.
And for me, when I look at these things, these Hawaiian plants, I really see a lot of beauty in them. And now when I look at them closely, I feel very happy that they're still around, because they were here since the beginning of time. The beginning of these islands, these plants found their way here and became so different from any place else in the world. When our children are born, we take care of them, we nurture them, and we care for them so that we can ensure their own survival. As they grow, we malama and we do everything we can to keep them. But we need to know that the way that we care for our children, we need to care for their environment, because our children will not live on this earth without their environment.
We're here in the Aupua of Manoa. Manoa Stream is the one that flows down this valley, and this beautiful enclave of taro gardens is perhaps the last taro gardens that we have in this valley. They were cultivated and refurbished by the University of Hawaii students. When the Hawaiians grew taro here in these big valleys, as they did in most of the large valleys on the main islands, they were capable of feeding nearly as many people as are living here today. This whole valley used to be in taro terraces, and right down through to the back of Waikiki, Mo'iliili, it provided food for this big population here on this side of the island.
Yeah, really.
Just tremendous.
Yeah, that's why it's so necessary to keep the water, under control, because, water, why is the word for wealth in Hawaiian, so water, it's really important to the Hawaiian.
The water feeds the aina, the aina feeds the people.
And the people malama the aina and the water. About 100 yards upstream from the Manoa Bridge, we have a little manuai, so called our dam, where we kind of use gravity and following the old Hawaii system, we get enough water to come down through here. We use about maybe 2 million gallons probably a day of water. But
taro is a very productive plant. Although Hawaiians grew taro successfully on dry land, they found it much more productive to grow it in water. From the stream, they brought the water down in an auai, and the auai took the water into the pond fields, the lo'i. And in a lo'i, the water keeps moving, and then some of the water is taken up by the plants as they absorb the nutrients. Some of it is evaporated by the sun. Some of it sinks down into the ground where it feeds the freshwater springs downstream. And then the rest of it goes off into the auai, as you can see here, and eventually goes back into the main stream. So that although there is a tremendous amount of water needed for the lo'i, the amount of water that is actually taken up and used by the taro is relatively little. So it is a very conservative plant in its use of water.
Yeah, this variety is called apuai. Apu meaning cup in Hawaii. So, and this is the pico elele or ipo olono. That's where we take whole kupu when we go up to Kaho'olawe. The old days, they used to have a lot of patches with a lot of these flowers, and they used to eat the flowers because they were so sweet and it smelled so sweet too. But this other guys over here, this dark stem is elele, part of our elele collection. This happened to be the elele now where so. Uahia pele is like the smoke of pele. So we have 70 different types of taro now in this Kanewai, and about 60 of which is Hawaiian varieties. This is a pu'uhonua for Hawaiian plants and the people. This is the last remnants of what used to be in the old Hawaiian days. You know, I mean, we have something that we can feel, we can work with. You know, it's part of us. So, we're kind of glad that we got this little ili over here to do what we're doing now. So,
A real pu'uhonua.
yeah, a real pu'uhonua.
For the community.
Yeah, right.
That's nice. The Hawaiians, all the descriptions that we have of Hawaiian taro gardens indicate that the taro gardens were relatively small. Each one was small. They fit into the terrain rather than remake the terrain into their image, the way we use bulldozers today.
Sometimes they raised fish in the lo'i, such as o'opu, and shellfish, hihivai and opai. And these contributed to the nutrients in the water. By the time the water gets down to the fish pond, at the Makai end of the stream, there is a tremendous amount of nutrients going into the fish pond. These nutrients then help the algae to grow and feed the herbivore fish.
We're down at the end of Palolo Stream, or Manoa Stream. The two of them come together up there at the base of Manoa Valley. In Hawaiian times, they had very large freshwater fish ponds right here in Waikiki. And the word Waikiki, wai is freshwater, kiki means sprouting or coming up or bubbling up, and there were springs all over Waikiki. Even I can remember when there were springs in Waikiki. Some of the early explorers who were here in the latter part of the 18th century and the early part of the 19th century wrote descriptions of what this looked like with all the taro gardens, literally hundreds of taro gardens, lo'i, in this area, all fed by stream water, the awai bringing the water down from the main stream. As far as the eye could see, this whole area here in Waikiki, Kapahulu, Mo'iliili, Manoa, and Palolo were covered with taro gardens. And what Vancouver and his botanists, Menzies and Kotzebue and others saw when they came here was fantastic fields of production for taro and large fish ponds in which they got their protein. They had everything that was really needed to survive. These areas were filled in. The fish ponds were all filled in the 1920s in order to make fast land for urbanization. And this canal was put in here to drain all the water out. So you have a situation where no longer does this land or do these freshwater streams produce food for people.
When Hawaiians first planted taro here, this stream was probably 4 or 5 times bigger than what it is now, maybe even more than that.
This is how we divert the water into our lo'i system. Pile up the stones, block the water, runs down the awai, and into our lo'i. We don't want to dry everything up over there and divert everything down because we need some water going down the stream, keep the stream alive.
From here, the awai goes all different directions. It basically follows this bank, and then we divert it off into the different taro patches. The basic system is the same for every lo'i. You divert it in one corner and go diagonal across the patch and let it go out the other corner. And the whole idea is to keep enough water in there so that it stays cold and is constantly flowing. Most people think that having a lot of rain and a lot of water is all taro needs, that's good. But actually that's not true. Taro really, it thrives in the sun, just like most plants do. Plenty water and plenty sun, that would be the best. The cycle depends on the variety. It can be anywhere from 8 months to a year and a half. And there's two things. One is how long it takes a taro before it's ready to harvest, and the other is how long it will keep in the patch once it is ready to harvest. The colder your water is, the longer the taro will keep in the patch. We probably have 15 different varieties. This is a pico taro, right? The pico is the place where the ha attaches to the lao. The pico taro is differentiated from the others in that the leaf is cut all the way down to the pico, as compared to, this is a Manalao loa, so you can see the two leaves. One is cut all the way down, and the other is not cut. This is another unusual variety, Pico lehua api'i, because the back of the leaf has these little ruffles on it. And there's another variety over there with the white on the leaf. That's Elepaio. There's a few different varieties here. This is the banlong, the one that they make the taro chips out of. This is kumu. A lot of times varieties will look different depending on where they're grown. You grow a variety in a dry, hot place, it's going to look different, have different coloration from a variety grown, the same variety grown in a wet place. And I think that probably explains why there's over 300 names for varieties of taro, Hawaiian varieties of taro. But the flower is important to know about because the Hawaiians knew about cross-pollination, and that's how they got some of their different varieties, by cross-pollinating. And really increases your respect for what the Hawaiians knew. They're described as, not as farmers, but as horticulturalists, because they knew so much. They were really observant of everything that went on. That's a good thing to develop in kids, to be observant of what's happening around them. This is a perfect environment for them to grow up in.
Waihe School is a unique school in the sense that the children are able to work the taro patches, plant the taro, weed the taro, take care of the taro till it's matured, and harvest the taro. And I think if more schools that have the resources do this, that's one aspect of educating our young people to one aspect of their culture. And if you could have seen the faces on those children, so proud that it's their taro, they pulled that taro, they raised that taro. And a lot of people forget the old, and they shouldn't. Because that's the foundation. That's why this was here, because of the people that first came here. They were the intelligent ones. And we have to live, we have to learn from them.
The big taro is the Makua taro. That's the mother taro, and that's where it starts from. The taros around it, the smaller taros are the oha, and that's basically where we get our ohana from, yeah? That's, the word ohana comes from that right there, from our taro corm. The whole clunk, it's one family, one ohana.
Do you ever have a sense of the past history of Hawaiians being there cultivating their taro, and here you are too?
That's all I used.
Carry on the tradition.
That's all I used. That was my main foundation. Hey, my great-grandmother, she pounded poi for everybody. This community, my family was well known. The eating of the taro, the eating of the poi. And all the Hawaiians used to come to my grandmother. You know, they wanted poi, and me'ai, need kalo, need poi. We fed a lot of people during the Depression time, during the war time, and times were hard. And I said, man, my grandmother did it. You know, my kupunas did it, I can do them too. And they had a history. They set one guide for me already. So all I did was go right back into it. You know, from one taro patch, kept opening another and another and another. Pretty soon, you know, I had 100,000 pounds of taro a year. I had to go through an experimental stage with all of my patches, which variety would do good in which patch. And it took me years, sort of like 10 years to find out. So, you know, it took some time to find out. I went through all kinds of varieties. But I came back to this variety, which is the Moe variety, basically grown in Maui. And a lot of the kupunas introduced this variety to me. It handles any conditions. The sturdiness of the taro was just, it amazed me.
Do you have any water actually going into the fish pond from the taro?
Only seepages. Part of my goal is to get the taro into the pond. This pond depends so much on the fresh water from the mountains, the fresh water from the taro patches.
About how much taro can you sell a week?
Actually, I cannot meet the demand. I just simply cannot meet the demand. With all the taro farmers in our state, we could never even dent the demand. You know, that's how much demand there is. Thank you. This land is all Kuleana lands, and all my family planted taro. So it's an inheritance of mine. With the Kuleana rights, you get your access rights, you know, your right-of-ways, and you get your water.